Welcome to The State of Us.
Beyond mainstream cable news and party lines, with a millennial and a boomer, The State of Us pushes past the noise and uncovers all the issues that matter.
Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Countless Americans are facing a situation that they either have never had to deal with or haven't had to deal with in a long time, and that's an economic downturn. Regardless of where you stand on everything that's going on with COVID-19, the reality is it's impacted American life, and for many people, it's impacted their personal financial situation. Oftentimes, during times of crisis, we make irrational or poor decisions that we rationalize with our money. So today, we're going to look at 10 mistakes that you're making with your money. Now, you may or may not be making these mistakes, but they're all something that we're probably prone to doing. And the nice thing is this applies regardless of whether you're experiencing hard times right now. We almost all go through it at some point. And so the nice thing is these are all very practical things to be aware of, to think about, and to not do when you inevitably face these situations. But of course, we couldn't begin a conversation on money and the economy without
TrueChat senior historian and an educator of more than 30 years. Here is your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
And unfortunately, folks, we have to be interested about money, right? A lot of people, young people particularly, don't like the idea of money, and they wish we could do away with it and make things more available for people. But until that happens, whether you like to talk about money or not, how you handle it during good times and bad times, but especially the bad times, is very important for stability in later life. So very interesting show today. Hope you listen and you learn something. So here we go.
Well, I had a different one up first, Lance, but based on what you just said, I think we'll shift the first one to let's not talk about money.
Okay.
Because this is one of the ones you and I marked. By the way, these are based on a Wall Street Journal article linked at thestateofus.org. There's a lot more in here than the 10 that we're going over. We tried to pick out the 10 that we felt were the most widely are going to have the most practical implications for everybody, right? There's a lot, if you're an investor, okay, like if you have stocks or mutual funds or something like that, IRAs, then you should definitely read the article because there's a lot in there. We're really not going to touch on a lot of that specifically because we know that many Americans, that's not going to be the most practical stuff. So the first one is let's not talk about money. And the author writes, with the pandemic forcing millions of people worldwide into financial distress, a natural response may be to avoid conversations about money at all costs. However, research suggests that discussing money with your partner or family in hard times can help your relationship and finances if you approach these situations the right way. I mean, to me, Lance, this one's real straightforward, right? We talk about all the time. The first step in solving any problem is admitting that there is one. Turning a blind eye is almost certain to either make the problem worse or at the very least to not improve the problem, right?
Well, and you're right, but this is a case where if I don't talk about it, it'll go away. Or if I don't bring it up, then it's not going to cause stress in the relationship. Whether it's with, your partner or whether it's with family, whoever you discuss money with. It's like, well, if I don't bring it up and they don't bring it up, then we can just ignore it and it'll all go away. Doesn't work that way. And really what happens is it just builds up the stress because you think, well, they're not even bothered about it. They're not thinking about it. And they are. I can just tell you that with the number of people that I talk to about money issues, that everybody's thinking about it. So whether the person that you talk to normally about it hasn't brought it up, they're worried about you as well and how you're dealing with it. And it also gives you, by talking about it, it gives you a sense of control of the situation. That is, if you're not talking about it, you're like, well, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next and where are we going with this? But if you have a discussion about your money and your financial situation during hard times, you come to some kind of conclusion, you come to some kind of agreement, and then all of a sudden that gives you some power over the problem in that you now have a plan of attack on how to work through this and get through to the other side. And getting that control of the situation by talking about it can really help your relationship with other people, because now you're not just worrying about it in silence. You actually, because you've talked to somebody about it, have a plan of attack on how to accomplish things and get through this rough time.
It's not always a pleasant conversation, but the reality is, I think like Lance is saying, if you put it off, and folks, I think as we go through this, right, remember, Lance and I are going to be advising a lot of these things, but it doesn't mean that we haven't done exactly the wrong thing in certain situations, right? I mean, everybody is susceptible to this, depending on what the money issue is. It's understandable, that you might try to avoid talking about it. But at the end of the day, it's probably going to serve you better to solve it. The sooner you're aware of it, the sooner you address it, it will be better than if it's put off, almost always. And that kind of folds into our next one, ignoring your credit score. Both of these are in the theme, right, of ignore something or don't talk about it. Well, it's kind of the same thing with your credit score. Whether or not you like credit scores, whether or not you believe, they work correctly, the reality is they impact all of our lives pretty much. Your ability to get decent interest rates, right? To have credit cards, and even the possibility of insurance or renting an apartment. So even if you're somebody that's like, well, I'm just going to pay cash for everything. Well, they might pull a credit report on you if you're going to rent an apartment, right? Or to get insurance, they might pull a credit report. So some of these things, even if you don't intend really to use credit per se, most Americans have a credit score, and they have a big impact on your life. So it's important that you keep watching it, especially during an economic downturn. Because if people are ignoring it, and something's going on and you're not aware of it and you really need money, it can take, speaking from experience here, it can take months or years to fix problems on your credit report, whether or not they're your fault, even if they're erroneously reported, which I've dealt with before by companies. You may be looking at months and months to get those reversed. So you want to keep an eye on it so that you can address it again right away.
Well, and by doing this, we're not talking about not borrowing money, right? We're not talking that, well, don't use your credit cards.
Right.
We're just saying keep an eye on it. And if your credit score drops a little bit, obviously the number one issue when you're struggling is to survive. So if you have to take on extra credit, you need to do that. And we're not saying don't use credit if you need it to get through a rough time. It's just keep an eye on things and figure out, again, that's where you have that conversation, to a plan to get it back to a better place or a more normal place for you as quickly as possible, because it will cost you down the road. So just don't ignore it, because then once things get good for you, you will still be paying more for any money that you're looking to borrow, for a house or a credit card or a car or whatever. So you want to keep an eye on it so that you can, if you see it dropping and it's like, oh, there's nothing I can do about it right now, you address those things as quickly as you can so that it will benefit you long term.
Our next one, Lance, is refusing to tap the emergency fund. Now, the author lays out two groups. I'm going to give you three. The first group is not having an emergency fund, right? If you truly don't have one, nothing, right, set aside that you can access, don't not do it because we're in a downturn, right? If nothing else, start, because I think pretty much any financial advisor would tell you having anything as opposed to having nothing, that's definitely better. Even if it's $100, right? It's better to have the $100 set aside and have access to it than to not have that set aside. So even if you can't set aside very much, start setting aside a little, right, at a time, because it will grow over time. And I'm glad that I have one. I didn't used to have one, but it's certainly, if nothing else, a comfort, right, to have there. And when something bad comes up, it's just easier then, because it's like, well, I got it there. The other two groups, okay, and this is where the author's talking, refusing to tap the emergency fund. The first group are those that are experiencing economic hardship and who choose to live uncomfortably rather than access their savings, right? Well, it's only for emergencies, and I don't know when a real emergency is, so I'm not going to use it even though I need it right now. No, he's saying, no, you got to go ahead and use it. And then the second group of people are those that have well-funded emergency savings and who are not experiencing economic hardship. and they're just sitting on the emergency fund. His advice here is, hey, don't get rid of your emergency fund, but if it's really well funded, more than what you need, during an economic recession, now's the time to invest. Pull some of that out, invest it in the markets, and earn some money on it rather than just have it sitting there.
Exactly. And I'll start with that one. I had 2 points, but I talked about all the time in my class, when the economy gets tough, if you have money, if you're lucky enough to have it, that's when you want to buy things. I mean, look at what you can get for like an automobile price right now. All the savings, because everybody was buying a house, how low it is for a mortgage. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that money, but if they do have it, like you said, now's the time to buy, because it's never going to be cheaper. If it's something that you need and you have the money. The second part, I've been working since I was 14, had a newspaper route when I was 14, but it was until I was 10 years later at 24, I had an older gentleman look at me and say, well, if you really want to make some money in your life, the first bill you pay is yourself. And that's kind of the rainy day fund idea. He said, I don't care what you do. You take out whatever percentage you want of your paycheck once you get it, and you put it in the bank and you pay yourself. He said, because then what happens is you learn to live off the rest of it. He said, so whether it's, 5%, 1%, 20%, but you'll adjust your style of living based on how much money you have. And that made so much sense to me. And it's something that I've continued to do. And it's put me in a situation where, luckily, through some breaks and hard work and different things, I'm in a fairly good spot for this rough time. As a retiree, which is scary. Being retired now and being, it's like, this is a rough time. It's like, do I use this money that I've worked for, that I've retired on, or do I not? Because is it like you said, is it going to get worse? So it doesn't matter where you are on the continuum of, whether you're young, like the Devon creature and just getting started and going to school, or you're an older retired person, these issues apply to all of us.
For you young people out there, or you more advanced individuals, if you are technology users, unlike our Mr. Lance Jackson here. But if you do mobile banking, check your bank, because a lot of them have easy save or auto save features now where you can program it anytime you get a deposit to automatically take 10% and set it into savings. You don't have to do anything other than set it up and it'll do it. And you can make the percentage or the dollar amount, whatever you want. And you can set goals on a lot of them and say, I want to get to this much and this is how much I want to set aside until I get there. And then there's not even the conscious side of, you set it up, you leave it, it's going to do it. And you don't have to worry about, I just put money in, now I got to set it aside. Just set it, and let it happen. Right. So there's more to talk about though. Entrepreneurial dreams, saying farewell to free time, and tendencies to overcorrect. We got to talk about all of that and more. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Abandoning entrepreneurial dreams. It probably seems kind of counterintuitive, right, to talk about starting a business during a recession. But the author points out that a downturn can be the perfect opportunity to access less expensive credit and get a discount on equipment for your business. For example, there's a lot of public programs out there like the State Small Business Credit Initiative, which are often expanded during recessions or economic downturns to encourage entrepreneurs to start a small business. And since most recessions are short, laying the groundwork during a downturn, securing capital, that can allow you to quickly pay off when the economy starts growing again. I thought this one was really interesting, Lance, because it is one of those things. It's probably the last thing, right? Like if you're out there and you've been thinking for a while, I'm gonna try this idea or start my own thing, and then something like this happens. It's like, well, I guess I can't do it now, right? And what he's saying is, not necessarily that you should go ahead and do it, but that it's probably worth looking into. You shouldn't rule it out.
Right. Because, what are we seeing on the evening news? We're seeing nothing but small businesses closing around us and talking to small entrepreneurs and saying, this is horrible and I need the laws to change and I need, a new stimulus package to come through so I can stay open, or I'll be closed by Christmas, or I'll be closed by the fall, or, all kinds of different negative shows that we're seeing, negative news that we are being bombarded with. But on the other end, it all depends too, right? On how well are you positioned when the recession hits. If you've got some money put aside and you've always thought about it, and it's an area that is growing anyway in the marketplace, how many empty buildings are there? So, the more empty buildings, how much cheaper could you negotiate rent because the owner just wants to get somebody in there? So there are things to look at if you have some money set aside to do this. Kind of goes along with that idea of when you're going to buy something, if you have money, a recession is the best time to buy it because your money will go further.
Farewell to free time. Recessions, obviously, right, tend to give us this idea that we got to make more money. And they shape how we spend our most important resource, which is time. That's the one thing, right? The one resource that we all have, but it's something that we have a limited quantity of. And how we spend it is incredibly important. And there's this tendency to, well, I got to work harder and I got to, make a bunch more money now because there's a recession. And the author's advice here is, while yes, you may, need to make some adjustments to your work life, right? You do have to resist the temptation to sacrifice everything for cash. Because if you're not careful, in the pursuit of making more, you'll actually end up making less because you'll be overstressed, overworked, right? And you won't remember why you're working hard in the first place. And that's that. Make time for family, make time for yourself. Those sorts of things are easy to forget about or think, well, I don't have time for that, right? Well, that's one, Lance, I guess in a broader context, I have always struggled with when people tell me, I don't have time to do that thing, whatever it is, right? I'd like to do it, but I don't have time to do it. Make time to do it, right? And that's whether it's family, a hobby, a new work thing that you want to do, whatever it is. It's amazing when you decide that you're going to do something. It's like the savings thing you said, Lance, right? If you just set aside 10% of your time, you learn how to live with the rest of what you've got. And I think people underestimate their capability to do that when it comes to their time.
I talk to a lot of younger people, because there aren't a lot of older people than me around. So most of my conversations are with younger people. And this is a big thing for you guys, is that you need to take time for yourself. And for a long time, I was like, yeah, but man, you got to get out there and you got to, you got to hustle. You got to do this. You got to do that. But as I've gotten older, I start to understand that, because as I reminisce and self-evaluate, there were times I think of things, family gatherings, birthday parties, different things like that I, skipped out of early or showed up too late because I was doing something that I thought was really important. And now that I'm older, I realize, what I was doing, I can't remember what I was doing that made me show up late or made me leave early. So I've kind of had a change of heart there, because for 20 or 30 years, I've been on younger people like, you got to go work. You got to do this. You got to do that. But there's some real validity to that about taking time for yourself so that your quality of life is better. And so you don't get to be older and resent the work you've done by missing out on things that were probably more important than your job at the time. You can't not then go to work because you want to go to the fairgrounds. You still have to meet your work commitments and work full time or whatever amount of work that you need to live the lifestyle that you want. That's where I think we have a disconnect. You got to put the time into work, but don't shortchange how important it is to take time for yourself and be around the people that you care about.
And that, Lance, it's almost like you knew what we were going to talk about next. A tendency to overcorrect. A tendency to overcorrect, right? Especially during financially challenging times, we have a tendency to succumb to anxiety and fear. And I don't know how many times, Lance, right, have we talked about the negative impacts of anxiety and fear. They have all kinds of terrible things that they do to people. One of those is a tendency to overcorrect on anything, right? But money is no exception. If somebody yells at you and chews you out about something, even if you defend yourself in the moment, you might then go way too far the other way, right? And totally change something. And that's not at all what the objective was, and it doesn't serve you or anybody else. And that's kind of what he's talking about here with money. The tendency can be to kind of white knuckle and bear down, right? And like, oh, I can't spend any money or do anything fun or spend any time with family. I gotta work and save, and that's all there is, right? And that's not good, because it's going to lead into what we talked about before. And he even says, for example, if you're worried about spending, you can cut all the fluff out of your budget and try to watch every penny, but then you end up missing opportunities to improve your income through networking or improving your skills. You become so focused on cut, right? And save, that you then miss opportunities to improve your portfolio. It's that whole, when we talk about balancing budgets, a lot of people say, right, there's two options. We can either cut what we're spending or increase what we're bringing in, or we can do a combination of those. And generally doing a combination is the best move, as opposed to just totally focusing on one or the other.
I think the key here is what I call self-evaluation. You constantly have to look at yourself. And yes, you take advice from all the other people in your life and you listen to it. And then you have to evaluate yourself and say, okay, what from each of these people that I learned applies to me and will give me the best opportunity to be successful. And because, let's face it, we're all put together a little differently, and what works for me doesn't work for Justin. What works for Devin might not work for me or whatever. And you've got to, but that doesn't mean that the advice isn't valuable, but you have to apply it to yourself and evaluate yourself and your own lifestyle and your own wants and your own needs, and then make the decision that's best for you once you've collected all the information. And I think that's what you were talking about or alluding to when you said, somebody yells at you and you go, okay, I'm going to do that now. And then we just go gung ho into that. It may not be the best situation for you. What worked for them may not be the best for you, but that doesn't mean there's not tidbits of information that you can apply to your life that will help you out in a tough time. So that self-evaluation piece is what I would add to that.
I want to turn to the Devin creature after the next one to see what his take is on all of our money talk so far. Is he making mistakes? What can we learn from a Gen Z perspective, right? But this one I don't think requires a lot of discussion other than just my brief commentary. One mistake is to keep paying all of your subscriptions. A lot of these are auto pay, right? And oh my gosh, I just found out the other day, and this is a real story in my life, that Brett and I have been paying for Showtime for like 8 months and I didn't even know it. And there went $80 that we didn't need to waste, right? Because we weren't even, that's the whole thing. Like, it was a service we weren't even using, right? It's not like, oh, we were using it, we have to sacrifice something that we want. It's like, nope, it wasn't even being used.
You hadn't watched a show or a movie on Showtime in the last 8 months.
Nope. So, again, that is one of those, look through your bank statement, right? Go to your online account activity and look at what came out over the last month. You may find 2 or 3 bills and you're like, what? I'm paying for that. And get it canceled. Cause that can add up to, $40, $50, $100 a month. And you could be saving that. You could be spending it on something you want. That's kind of it's true during an economic downturn. It's particular interest right now, but I think generally, it's one that you got to keep an eye on. So what do you make, Devin, of everything we've discussed so far? Are you making these mistakes? Are you well off financially? You're just doing it all right? What's the deal?
So I will say, as I have become an adult from a teenager, I did make a lot of these mistakes. And the one person that really helped me realize I was making a lot of these financial mistakes was my mother, because she was doing the same thing. And then she found Dave Ramsey. And really after that, that's when everything kind of changed.
There's another one. Justin and the Devin creature, Dave Ramsey disciples. There you go. Go ahead, Devin. I just find that interesting. Okay.
So I took a lot of what she had to say, because I was just like, I don't really want to get invested into like all of his books and his readings. I was like, I want the core principles. So she gave me what I wanted, and I started, like you said, applying it to my life and trying to work. I have an emergency fund. I make sure I track all my subscriptions. I did find one, however, the other day where I was just like, wait, I'm paying $6 a month for this? I was like, when did this happen? So, I mean, really, we're still victim to make mistakes whenever. It's just we need to keep an eye on it, but I don't think it's something we should stress out about a lot and cause that anxiety and then overcorrect our mistakes and, go through an endless cycle.
What else can be done? What are the remaining mistakes that you might be making with your money? Well, we're about to wrap them up, but there's a few more and they're pretty important. We saved the best for last. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
All recessions are the same. No. Lance, tell us why. Why are all recessions not the same? What does history tell us?
Well, because there's just so many variables involved. What caused it? Is it a war? Is it a pandemic? Is it bad banking maneuvers? And each one of those things can be solved in different ways. So what causes them has sometimes a large amount to do with how long they last, how deep they are, and what it's going to take to fix them. You have to really look and see what is going on this time and, how long and listen to the experts and find out how long they think it's going to last, what's causing it, when will a solution be around to solve that, which will allow things to get better. And then again, apply it to your own personal life. How well prepared were you for the financial downturn? The better prepared you are, the more options you have available to yourself on how to get through it. I would go one step further and say not only are all recessions different, but what's right to do is different for each person based on their financial stability when the recession hits. And I just want to throw one thing since I have the mic here, in debate form. Win one for the old guy and paying paper bills. I'm not paying for anything that I don't know about because I get sent a bill every month by the paper, in paper form. So none of that online banking. You make fun of me, but I don't end up paying for Showtime for 8 months that isn't necessary because I didn't notice it on my bill.
Those companies are getting Lance pretty well converted, though. They're trying. They're trying to push
they're forcing me, to do things, and they're making some really enticing offers. But I don't want to fall into that rut that you guys are talking about because you have to be hypersensitive to that. And you have to take the time if it's coming out automatically to look online every month.
Pros and cons of the online investing, right? One of the it's both. Set and forget is a benefit and drawback of online. It's definitely a benefit from a savings standpoint, right? Because it's like, I'm going to save, right? I mean, it's going to happen. Whether or not I want to or think about it, I'm going to get it saved. And that's great, right? I mean, that's absolutely a benefit. At the same time, set and forget on things that you have to pay while it's convenient also leads to those things that Devin and I have both experienced. This next one I think is interesting because we kind of touched on it before, but this is from a personal standpoint. So we talked about businesses, right? Don't give up on entrepreneurial dreams. One of the reasons you shouldn't do that is because interest rates tend to be low. But from the personal side, this is an excellent time, right? Especially if your financial standing really hasn't changed all that much. I've made some of the biggest moves with money that I've made over the past 5 years this year. That's from an investing standpoint, from a savings standpoint, from a, loaning money standpoint, all of that. Because if you're not in a drastically different financial situation than you had been before, you can leverage the opportunity where interest rates are in the tank to save yourself thousands or tens of thousands of dollars by refinancing, taking out new money now as opposed to later. I think that's a really big one, Lance, people to keep in mind. Because again, that kind of goes with that retract thing of people think, well, now is not the time to borrow money. Well, if you're making the same amount of money you were before and your job prospects are okay, now is the time to do it if you were thinking about doing it.
Right. Because again, if let's say you're going to school right now and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm a little bit short of funds because of my job or whatever. I don't have the money to pay for school. Well, you can go get the student loans, and the student loans are a lot cheaper than putting it on your credit card. You know what I'm saying? That's just one example of cheap money. You're like, well, I'm going into debt down the road. Yeah, but you're going into debt at a lower rate than you might if you just put it on your credit card. If that was, well, when things were good, I'll just put tuition on the credit card and I'll pay it off in a couple of months and it's gone. Okay, now things are tight and you can't do that. Well, rather than having that balance set on a credit card that's maybe costing you 15, 18, 25% interest every month, you can go get a student loan. And I know, there's something student loan, taboo, can't get student loan, can't go into debt for an education. But if it's going to enhance your earning ability later, well, then you get that student loan and you're paying maybe 5, 6, 7% interest on that money instead of 20% interest on that credit card. You've saved yourself a bunch of money. So that's just a case in point of where you've got to be careful what applies to you. Because everyone's like, oh, you can't go into student debt because student debt is horrible and it's ruining young people. Well, but there are times when if you need that schooling to get the better job or to enhance your career and you have to borrow the money, borrow it the cheapest way possible.
For the young people listening, I want to talk to Devin about what's, and I'll let you answer this either way, the biggest takeaway from today's show, the thing that you think people most need to pay attention to, or something that you've done in your financial life that you feel like was really a game changer, right? Something that made you feel better about your financial situation that was pretty notable to you.
For me, the takeaway that I'm really getting for the show is that you really need to do what applies to yourself. As in, like, as you have gone through these points, I mean, not everything is applicable to every person. So I feel like as long as you take parts and try to work at, being better with your money or, just even trying to get by, you should just do what you need to do in that moment to take care of yourself. And as Lance said, I thought it was a really great idea to pay yourself first or, spoil yourself first right when you get your paycheck that's how I personally have overcome a lot of my spending habits is like, I'll buy myself something. So like, I'm like kind of, I still save money back, but if I buy one thing for myself, like this water bottle I've been looking at, then, I don't see anything wrong with that. I feel like it's like a guilty pleasure and I just choose to not feel guilty about it anymore.
I think that's really important, because you have to reward yourself. And Justin kind of mentioned it earlier in the show that you kind of have to reward yourself for all the hard work that you're doing. You have to have some way of saying, okay, I'm not just working to pay the bills. I'm working to enhance my life. And so if you need to find something, a hobby, or you buy that water bottle or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a big, huge purchase. It can just be something that you indulge yourself in because you know what? I deserve this because I've been working hard. And so I don't do this, that, or the other thing. I make all these cuts, but you're still rewarding yourself for all the hard work that you do, which then makes it easier to get up every morning or every afternoon and head to work, and do your job is because you know that when you get paid, you're going to do a little something for yourself. I think that's a great point, Devin.
Thank you. I will, for me, I'm personally strapped for time a lot. So I have to make a lot of cuts in my life. I can't go to certain things because I'm like, oh, I have to do homework or go do this, and this. But I feel like it's just a really good way to just like, take care of yourself that way. So that way you don't like go down the road and hit the endless cycle of going through the same motions and then you get lost on why you were even trying to save money.
The last point, number 10, we saved this one for last because I think it's a good sum up of everything else. Failing to continue to learn. And yes, folks, if you're longtime listeners and if you've listened all the way to the end of the show, then there's a decent chance that you're one of our loyal listeners, right? When times are tough, it's easy to get distracted and not think about your career journey. But employees, workers need to carve out time, even if it's just a few hours per month, to focus on career goals. Learning new skills, relationship building, and really focusing on future trends will put you in the best position to seize an opportunity for advancement when it presents itself. Don't be siloed by your past experiences. Instead, broaden your thinking, focus on new challenges or responsibilities, regardless of your current job title, right? Keep thinking, keep planning, keep learning, keep growing.
Every piece of knowledge that you gain will help you down the road. Career opportunities will open up, and if you're not prepared for them, you can't take advantage of them. So continuing education, whether it's taking something that your company provides, and you learn to do something in a 1 or 2 day training or a weekend training session that gives you a little certificate, may seem immaterial. And then all of a sudden a job opens up in that company or at another company that says, we want somebody who can do this. And you're like, hey, I got my little certificate last year doing that. Then you can make that move. Or maybe it's worth, 30 cents more an hour or 50 cents more an hour. Or whether it's an entire program that you're working on, stay the point. And even if you have to back off a little bit, and maybe you're going full time and you just back off and you go part time, keep your foot in the door, because it's a lot easier to keep learning than it is to stop cold turkey and say, well, you know what? I'm going to do this later. I'll do it when it's better. Even if you have to slow down and take one class at a time or one class every other semester or quarter or whatever it is, that continuing education is huge. And it's also rewarding because, again, you're doing something for yourself.
And keeping in mind, too, people, again, who listen for a long time should know that Lance and I refer to both education in the traditional sense, but education more broadly as well, in the respect that, don't stop your self-improvement either, right? That's part of learning. Make sure that you're continuing, and Devin even mentioned that self-evaluation, right? With your money habits and reflecting on what is your money situation and financial situation? What is your job prospect? What do you want? Even just going over those things. And you can do that in your head before you go to bed, right? Well, maybe that's not the best time, but in the morning, when you wake up or something, 5 minutes a week to review that, those things do make a big difference. It's like it's better to save $10, right, than $0. And it's better to spend a little time learning and improving than to spend no time doing it at all. And that, Lance, is sort of what we're doing here on The State of Us, right? What the whole company of True Chat, the entity behind The State of Us, that's what we're trying to do with all of our programs. We have a common mission, right?
We have a mission here at True Chat, and it's to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And that's what I feel like today was. We weren't, like diving hardcore into some news thing and going back and forth and debating an issue. We were just calmly, rationally having a conversation about this. And hopefully you learn something, or a family member or a friend who might learn something from this. And make sure you tell them about us. And if they say, well, you seem really excited about these guys and what they're talking about, how do I listen? Well, tell them, well, hey, you can find them on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere podcasts are found.
And Devin, if our listeners want to find The State of Us, what are the different ways, what are the different times, rather, that it's released?
The State of Us is released as a podcast by 4 a.m. Eastern Time on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The State of Us is also a syndicated radio show, so be sure to check your local talk show station. And if they don't carry The State of Us, give them a call and tell them that they should.
For The State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
And I'm Devin McCain.
Special thanks to our editing producer, Bradley Butch, and thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.